A new league season, and with it, a new NHL Entry Draft. Hope for the teams who floundered last season that they can find their next homegrown franchise player who can turn their fortunes around. But think back 10 years. All those teams that had similar high picks and similar hopes, how did it turn out for them?
Toronto proud to announce from Zurich, Auston Matthews.
10 years later, time is a flat circle. The Maple Leafs won the draft lottery and the right to select what was viewed as one of the prime prospects of recent memory in Auston Matthews. Maybe not to the level of a McDavid or Crosby, but still elite offensive talent, and that's borne out throughout his career in Toronto. 10 years, over 400 goals and almost 800 points. He's been scoring at a level we haven't seen since Alex Ovechkin's heyday. The current captain on his team, he's won everything from Rocket Richards to the Hart Trophy. The only blemish against him is he hasn't led the Maple Leafs to that Stanley Cup they're so desperately craving. And while Leafs fans might hold that playoff performance against him, I don't. He's been everything and more that you could want from a number 1 overall pick. It's not his fault that the Maple Leafs can't build a team around him, or give him a semi-competent coach or front office.
Perfect.
The Winnipeg Jets are proud to select from Tampere of the Finnish Elite League, Patrik Laine.
At pick number 2, the Winnipeg Jets went with another highly skilled offensive weapon in Patrik Laine, a guy who was billed when he came into the NHL as the next Alex Ovechkin. He turned out to be late-stage Ovechkin minus all of the physical play, but he was still a damn effective player for Winnipeg. He played in over 300 games and scored over 100 points for the Winnipeg Jets before he was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Not his fault that the Jets botched that trade. A lot of teams did that when trading for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And while the rest of his career has been uneasy thanks to injuries and some mental health issues, he's still an effective player when he's at full strength. This wasn't a bad pick by the Winnipeg Jets, just not as great as they were hoping.
Perfect.
Columbus Blue Jackets are proud to select from Cape Breton Screaming Eagles, Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Speaking of Pierre-Luc Dubois, here he is, pick number 3 overall by the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that thought that they were getting their center of the future in him. And for a little while, it looked like that was what was going to happen. He was very effective in his first 3 years in Columbus. Then year 4 happened, the infamous shift, the reports of attitude problems, the clashing with coaches, and he was shipped out to Winnipeg, where he was marginally impactful, but not really. He then got flipped over to the LA Kings, where he was an unmitigated disaster and one of the worst contracts that we had seen. When he got traded to Washington, it really felt like his last chance, but he's kind of embraced that. He's been exactly what the Washington Capitals have needed, and he's been mostly the good soldier here. But when you consider what was expected from him in that number 3 slot and how bad it ended in Columbus, you can't say that this was a win for the Jackets.
And with the 4th selection in the 2016 entry draft from Karpat in Finland, Jesse Puljujärvi.
After the Dubois disaster, though, we have our first real true bust of this draft. Jesse Puljujärvi was drafted by the Edmonton Oilers, and coming into the draft, he was seen as a much better prospect than Dubois. It was a big 3 of him, Matthews, and Laine, and a lot of scouts thought that he was a more complete player than Patrik Laine, so when he fell to 4th, the Edmonton Oilers were thrilled. But his low hockey IQ was quickly snuffed out in the NHL, and it didn't help that the Edmonton Oilers rushed him into the bit show way too early. He played 6 years in Edmonton, putting up 51 goals and 112 points before bouncing around a bit to teams like Pittsburgh, Carolina, and Florida. Just a massive whiff here by Edmonton.
Vancouver select from the London Knights, Olli Juolevi.
As bad as Puljujärvi was, though, at least he managed to carve out a decent career in Edmonton for a bit. Vancouver's selection at pick number 5 of Olli Juolevi was beyond a bust. It was a complete disaster. He barely managed to crack the show, only playing in 40 games in his career, and after a few years in the Vancouver system, he was eventually dumped to the Florida Panthers, where he never made much of an impact. Even at the time, it was a bit of a questionable pick because he was big and strong, yeah, but he was getting turnstiled by guys in juniors, and then he ended up having knee surgery. Just an absolute abomination of a pick in the top 5 for Vancouver.
Our 2016 first round pick from the Memorial Cup champion London Knights, Matthew Tkachuk.
Vancouver's loss is the division rival Calgary's gain as they take Matthew Tkachuk at pick number 6. The son of former NHLer Keith made waves in the OHL and put the London Knights on his back along with teammates Mitch Marner and Christian Dvorak, and was seen as one of the most dynamic two-way forwards in the NHL draft. And he proved to be that in Calgary. In his 6 seasons in Calgary, he was not only a dominant physical threat, but almost a point-a-game player, putting up 380 points in 420 games. But the great glory days were then replaced by the terrible fall. Matthew Tkachuk got unhappy. He wanted to play back in America and demanded a trade. Ultimately, Calgary accommodated him, sending him to Florida in exchange for what was seen to be a huge package. A 100-point player in Jonathan Huberdeau and a top 4 defenseman in Mackenzie Weegar, it seemed like Calgary got great value. It didn't end up turning out that way, but it looked like a good trade at the time. Unfortunately, Matthew Tkachuk's become one of the ultimate villains of the NHL, in part thanks to Florida's dominance, and he's now won 2 Stanley Cups and been an integral part of that. Doesn't feel great for Calgary, but you did get the pick right.
Perfect.
The Arizona Coyotes are pleased to select from the U.S. National Development Program, Clayton Keller.
If there are words of encouragement I can give to Toronto Maple Leafs fans about their new GM John Chayka, it's that he crushed his first draft. The newly minted Wonder Kid GM spent his first top 10 pick for the Coyotes on Clayton Keller, and boy howdy has that pick worked out for him. Over 200 goals and almost 600 points after 10 seasons, he has been an elite offensive player for the Coyotes. Even though the team hasn't ended up being that great, Clayton Keller was absolutely the right pick in this spot.
Perfect.
Buffalo selects Alex Nylander.
At pick number 8, the Buffalo Sabres went with the other Nylander brother in Alexander. Son of Michael and brother to Willie, it was hoped that Alex Nylander would be much more of a complete playmaker than his brother was. He was expected to be a running mate for their recently taken number 2 overall pick Jack Eichel, but instead he just crashed, tripped, and broke his leg. He spent most of his pro career in the AHL, bounced around after leaving Buffalo, and was most recently in the NHL playing with his brother in 2024-25, where he played in 5 games and put up 0 points. Unquestionably a miss for the Buffalo Sabres.
Montreal selects from the OHL Windsor Spitfires Mikhail Sergachev.
At pick number 9, the Montreal Canadiens took what was seen as one of the best foreign defensemen in the entire draft. Mikhail Sergachev was as an elite two-way defenseman who could create off the rush, and that's exactly what he turned into, just not for Montreal. They traded him in a blockbuster to acquire a former top 5 pick in Jonathan Drouin. Yeah, it's safe to say they didn't win that trade, but the pick here was correct.
Perfect.
We're proud to select in this year's entry draft from the BC Hockey League, Penticton Bees, Tyson Jost.
Rounding out the top 10, the Colorado Avalanche took what was seen as a high-floor, high-IQ future middle 6 forward in Tyson Jost. But honestly, even in Colorado, he didn't quite reach those heights. He was mostly a bottom sixer who was a defensive first forward and only put up 100 total points in 6 years in Colorado before he was traded to the Wild from Nico Sturm. He's bounced around and had a pretty steady career for the last decade, but I don't necessarily know that he's the right pick here at number 10. Good player, just not in the right spot.
The Ottawa Senators are proud to select from the Windsor Spitfires, Logan Brown.
The Senators taking Logan Brown at pick number 11 was seen as a little bit of a reach. He was more of a projection than a fully formed product, but his size and flashes of offensive talent made him an incredibly enticing pick for Ottawa in this spot. Unfortunately, it just never came together for Brown. He ended up playing 6 years in the NHL, but never eclipsed 100 games played or 30 points total. He hasn't played a game in the NHL since 2023, and it's unlikely that he's going to have a late career resurrection. Just a miss here on a reach at this spot for the Senators.
Please to select from the OHL Mississauga Steelheads, Michael McLeod.
At number 12, the New Jersey Devils made a sensible pick at the time of Michael McLeod, a very fast, speeding guy who could create some offense. His offensive skill didn't really translate well to the NHL, though he did end up playing in almost 300 games for the Devils and peaked at 26 points in a single season. He hasn't played for the Devils since the 23-24 season for a reason I can't quite put my finger on. It's a complete mystery to me. Even taking all of that out of the equation, which we absolutely should not, he was not a good pick here.
Right to jail, right away.
The Hurricanes are proud to select from Calgary, the WHL, Jake Bean.
Jake Bean was one of the better North American defensemen in the draft, and he was seen as a guy who had long-range top 4 projection with his offensive skills. The concerns were in his size and physicality, and honestly those concerns have kind of been borne out. He's yet to play in a full NHL season, which is part of the reason that Carolina dumped him for a second-round pick in 2021. Especially considering some of the defensemen they could have taken in this spot, this has to be seen as a miss for the Canes.
With the 14th pick, the Boston Bruins select Boston University Terrier Charlie McAvoy.
Case in point, the player that the Boston Bruins took immediately after Jake Bean. Charlie McAvoy was a dynamite prospect as a two-way defender with room to develop, and boy has he ever. He's become a legitimate number 1 defenseman for the Bruins, playing in over 500 games and putting up almost 500 points. Just an absolute home run hit of a pick here by the Bees.
Perfect.
Minnesota's proud to select from the University of Wisconsin, Luke Kunin.
At pick number 15, the Wild were desperate to add a skilled center, and so they took the best one available in Luke Kunin. He had a lot of skill, even though his size was a little bit of a concern, and oddly enough, those offensive skills never really translated to the NHL. He's put up only 150 points in his 500 games of NHL action over his 10-year career, and quickly became a journeyman playing for teams like Nashville, San Jose, Columbus, and now Florida. He's a fine depth piece, but at this pick right here, it's hard to say that he wasn't a disappointment given what the Wild were expecting.
Arizona Coyotes select from the Ontario Hockey League Sarnia Sting, Jacob Chychrun.
In every draft, there's one of those guys who people think has the skill to be a top 10 pick and inexplicably falls, and in 2016, that was Jacob Chychrun. He was seen as a guy with a complete skill set, NHL size, and a really good two-way play style. The concern was his mentality and how he would handle running into adversity, which is really not great for a team like the Coyotes who took him, but he managed to prove everybody wrong. In 7 years in Arizona, he was a top 4 defenseman, playing in over 370 games, scoring 60 goals and putting up 170 points. But as good as he was, his contract demands were very high, and Arizona moved off of him for a first and 2 second-round picks in a trade to Ottawa. Ottawa immediately misused him, flipped him to Washington for Nick Jensen, and since going to the Capitals, he's become a top-pairing defenseman. Just because 2 teams didn't necessarily use him properly doesn't mean it wasn't the right pick here. John Chayka hit again.
Perfect.
The Nashville Predators are proud to select from Penticton, the BC Junior League, Dante Fabro.
The Predators followed up Chychrun at pick number 17 by taking Dante Fabro, another very solid two-way defenseman who was seen as a bit more of a developmental project. Turned out he only needed a few years of college puck before he was ready to jump right to the NHL, where he's been ever since he made his debut. Fabro hasn't exactly lit the league on fire, but he's a reliable third-pairing defenseman who can play second-pairing innings in an absolute pinch, and he was pretty effective for the Predators. Still though, at this spot, not exactly the greatest pick.
Winnipeg Jets are pleased to select from the Windsor Spitfires of the OHL, Logan Stanley.
When you think about developmental pieces though, Logan Stanley at pick number 18 for the Winnipeg Jets was absolutely that. The guy was a massive player at 6'7", 225, and he had pretty good foot speed to go along with it. But he was still pretty raw, needed some development, and just like Fabro, once he made it into the NHL, he basically stuck there. And like Fabro, he really was only a second or third pairing defenseman at his peak. Not a bad player by any means, but you were probably looking for a little bit more from somebody you were taking in the top 20.
New York Islanders select forward Kiefer Bellows.
At pick number 19, Kiefer Bellows was seen as a pretty good gamble for the New York Islanders. Incredibly skilled, though he needed a little bit more time to develop in college where he was going to go play with Charlie McAvoy. Bellows was a high upside swing, and it was a swing and a miss for the Islanders. He only ended up playing parts of 4 years in New York to a lack of consistency and being unable to round out the scoring touch with really any other puck skills. He's now playing in the Swedish League. Definitely a bust here for the New York Islanders.
The Detroit Red Wings are pleased to select from the Chilliwack Chiefs of the BC Hockey League, Dennis Cholowski.
When it comes to reaches, at this point in the draft there had not been any egregious ones. Then the Red Wings took Dennis Cholowski at pick number 20. Cholowski was seen as a pretty competent two-way player, but the fact that he had been playing in the second-tier league made some folks a little bit concerned and put him more towards the end of the first round, early second round type pick. The Red Wings saw him as a guy with high upside and took him at pick number 20, and while he always seemed to have the high scoring touch that they saw in juniors, he never developed any of the other skills necessary to make him an NHL defenseman. Cholowski ended up playing 100 games for Detroit, but after that he was a waiver wire regular and bounced around between a bunch of different NHL teams, and spent last year as a depth defenseman with the New Jersey Devils. The Red Wings reached for a star, and they came up with nothing here.
With our selection, we'll pick from Val-d'Or, Julien Gauthier.
Carolina used their second first-round pick of the draft to take power forward Julien Gauthier at number 21. A massive forward at 6'3", 230, the hope was he could add more skill to his already very strong and gritty play style to become a well-rounded top 6 forward. Unfortunately for him, those skills and that scoring touch just never developed. He only played in 5 games for Carolina before he was flipped over to the New York Rangers, which is where he spent the majority of his tenure, playing in over 100 games and only scoring 26 total points.
Philadelphia is proud to select from Russians under 18 team German Rubasov.
The second Russian off the board in the 2016 draft was seen as a terrific checking center with the potential to develop offensively. The concern at the time was that he was playing in the Russian league and it might be difficult to get him over, but Philadelphia took the swing on him at pick number 22. And Philly eventually did manage to coax him across the pond, just not into the NHL, because he's only played 4 games in there in his entire career and has mainly been an AHLer. The most notable NHL action he's had was being a part of that Claude Giroux to Florida trade.
Florida Panthers would like to draft from HIFK of Helsinki, Finland, Henrik Borgstrom.
Now this one was a head scratcher because while you could justify a guy like Cholowski going in the 20s because he was seen as a late first round pick and Detroit wasn't going to be picking when he would be available, Borgstrom was seen as a late second, early third round pick, and the Florida Panthers snatched him up at pick 23. He did get to play in 100 games in the NHL, mostly over 2 seasons in Florida and Chicago, and during that time the formerly skilled scoring winger only put up 13 goals and 26 points. Yeah, definitely not what you were wanting to see here, Florida.
From the London Knights, Max Jones.
Unlike the guys taken before him, Max Jones has managed to carve out a decent NHL career. He's played in over 300 games, 250 of which were with the team that drafted him, Anaheim. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that those were effective games. Max Jones is a pretty good fourth liner, for sure, but you would want a guy you're drafting in the first round to be, good. So while he may not be what Anaheim hoped they were taking at this pick, not a disaster.
Perfect.
Dallas Stars are proud to announce from the United States Junior Hockey League, Riley Tufte.
And you want to talk about a disaster? Look no further than the number 25 pick by the Dallas Stars, Riley Tufte. He was a very raw prospect with massive size at 6'5", and some offensive flashes, but he had been playing mostly in high school, and so it was seen as a bit of a risk to take him. But at the end of the first round, not a bad swing by Dallas. Unfortunately, like most big swings, it just corkscrewed them into the ground. Riley Tufte only played in 28 games in his NHL career, putting up only 3 goals and 1 assist. He's become your classic tweener between the NHL and AHL, which is what makes it so disappointing as to who Dallas passed up on next.
St. Louis Blues are proud to select from Yukon forward Tage Thompson.
Not to make this all about my team for a minute, but pick 26 was originally owned by the Washington Capitals, who traded back, letting the St. Louis Blues come up to take Tage Thompson. And you might be thinking, Tage Thompson, isn't he a Buffalo Sabre? Well, yes, he is, because he spent most of his career there after St. Louis traded him just 2 summers later as part of a massive package that brought them back Ryan O'Reilly. And while you could say that the Blues would be much better off now had they held on to Tage Thompson, the fact that they got Ryan O'Reilly, who helped them win a Stanley Cup, means that you can't really criticize that trade too badly. It was a good trade by them, a good pick by them, and Tage Thompson's become a star in Buffalo. Just great process by everybody all around, except for the Capitals, who could have just taken him here.
Perfect.
Tampa selects from Moose Jaw, Brett Howden.
Ironically, when he was drafted, Brett Howden was seen as kind of a low-floored, low-ceiling type of player, a good two-way forward who might have the opportunity to develop some skill, which is why the Lightning grabbed him here at pick number 27. And while that eventually ended up happening, it wasn't for Tampa Bay, who traded him to the New York Rangers as part of a big package that got them Ryan McDonagh and JT Miller. He was okay as a bottom six forward in New York, putting up 16 goals and 39 points in 3 years there before he signed with the Vegas Golden Knights, where his career has become supercharged, and he put up a massive performance in the last playoffs and scored 40 points in 2024-25. His career has been very good, but there's also that aspect of it. Good pick here by Tampa, even if it's for not a very good person.
Perfect.
Became the first panelist to injure himself during the first round of the draft by giving him
Johansson.
Washington right into it.
After the Caps moved back 2 spots and didn't take Tage Thompson, they selected defenseman Lucas Johansson out of Kelowna, who's seen as a developmental two-way defenseman. He never ended up developing and only played in 9 total games for the Caps in his career. He's now currently looking for a team to play with after being a depth defenseman for Vegas. Oh god, this one stings me.
With the 29th pick, the Boston Bruins select from the National Development Program, Trent Frederick.
The Bruins at pick number 29 took a bit of a surprise here. Another guy who was projected to go in the 3rd round, but had a lot of raw talent and size in Trent Frederick. Boston ultimately was able to develop him into a solid bottom 6 forward. He ended up getting flipped as part of a 3-way trade to the Edmonton Oilers at the deadline last year before he signed one of the most laughably egregious contracts known to the NHL in a long time, but that's not really his fault so much as it is Stan Bowman's. Frederick's fine for what he is. He's played over and over 400 games and put up over 100 points, and he's not purely a 4th liner. He can play 3rd line minutes if you need to. Considering this is the very end of the 1st round, Boston would take that.
Perfect.
Anaheim selects from the Regina Pats, Sam Steele.
And the same could be said for the last player picked in the 2016 1st round, Sam Steele, taken by the Anaheim Ducks. He was seen as a solid two-way playmaking center with a little bit of room to develop, but a lower ceiling, and he ended up being an effective bottom 6 center. He's played in over 400 games, put up 175 points, and given the Anaheim Ducks 4 pretty solid years. He was eventually traded to the Leafs in exchange for Freddie Anderson, but has signed with the Dallas Stars and given them the majority of the remainder of his NHL career, and he's been a solid bottom 6er for them. Decent value for picking at the end of the 1st round.
Perfect.
While the 1st rounders always get headlines, there is always the possibility that gems can be found in the 2nd round and later. In the 2016 draft, it started with Andrew Peeke, a pretty solid defenseman who ended up getting taken at the 35th overall pick, followed immediately by the St. Louis Blues getting Jordan Kyrou, who would be an incredibly solid top 6 winger, before he was eventually traded to Washington. Just 4 picks later, Chicago took Alex DeBrincat, who ended up being an incredibly effective player, even though it took him a little while of bouncing around before he found a permanent home in Detroit. You also have some other pretty effective NHLers taken in the 2nd round, like Nathan Bastian, Sam Girard, Ryan Lindgren, and Carter Hart.
Right to jail, right away.
And later on, Dylan Dubé.
Also jail.
Yeah, enough said about those 2 guys, the better. But the Red Wings arguably got the biggest steal of the 2nd round at pick 53 when they took Filip Hronek. He turned out to be a great top 4 and number 2 defenseman for Vancouver. He was taken just 2 picks before Philip Gustafsson, the Gus Bus, was picked by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Probably a guy they wish that they had held on to, but alas, and the 2nd round was closed out by guys like Carl Grundstrom and Taylor Radish, good role players. The Toronto Maple Leafs kicked off the 3rd round by taking Joseph Woll, a very good goaltender for them in spots, who was just traded to the Philadelphia Flyers, and then the Calgary Flames made the biggest hit of the entire 3rd round, taking a defenseman out of the U.S. national team named Adam Fox. He turned out to be pretty damn good, even though it wasn't for Calgary. Other notable names taken in the 3rd round that year, Rem Pitlick, Josh Mahura, and Connor Ingram. In the 4th round, you had guys like Victor Mete, Brandon Duhaime, and Noel Gregor getting selected, but Ross Colton at pick 118 to the Tampa Bay Lightning was undoubtedly the best pick of this round. In the 5th round, you had only 2 guys taken who've played over 100 games in the NHL, Michael Eyssimont, taken by the LA Kings, and Beck Malenstein, selected by the Washington Capitals. In the 6th, though, unquestionably the best value pick of the entire draft was taken by the Buffalo Sabres when they selected Brandon Hagel, but you can't sleep on guys like Jesper Bratt and Michael Pezzetta who were taken in the 6th. The only notable player taken in the 7th round was by the Edmonton Oilers, who selected Vinny Desharnais with the 183rd pick in the draft. The last man taken in the 2016 draft was Philip Helt, picked number 211 overall by the St. Louis Blues. He never played a single game in North America and is currently playing in the Czech Tier 2 league. But he forever gets the glory of being Mr. Irrelevant.